Good evening, and welcome to another edition of the FTTC podcast, sponsored by Two Friends. When your team is booty, cheer up with a trip to Big Booty Land and the Big Booty Mixes. We are your home for breaking news and breaking balls in the fantasy sports world. From touchdowns to tailgates, we've got it all covered with a dash of witty banter. I'm your host, Jason Stankiewicz, and later on, I'll be joined by the FTTC's current table topper, Mr. Dan Zay. On today's podcast, we'll take a turn around the league to discuss all the FTTC results of Week 5 and take a deeper look at performance thus far before chatting with the DiZaysters and maybe hearing a mailbag question or two. On that note, let's go ahead and get to it. So, looking at the matchups from last week, we had some interesting ones. There's no doubt about it. The first one that we're going to start off with here, though, it's got to be Vic Vinegar putting up a stellar 163 points against Mr. Team DS. Vic Vinegar, DJ Moore, a 45-point performance was going to kick the week off right. It was going to be tough for Vic Vinegar to lose with that. Travis Etienne putting up another 34 points. And I got to say, I think Etienne has been worth the pick. I laughed at that pick when it was made. I think most of the league did. The commissioner especially was chirping Vic Vinegar, as he always does. But Vic Vinegar, it might be getting the last laugh here because Etienne has been maybe a top 5 running back to date, has definitely performed very well. And Vic Vinegar is absolutely loaded at the running back position. Finally plays Achan or Achan. I'll learn how to say his name one of these days. Finally plays Achan. Eventually loses him to injury, but not before he puts up 21 points. I honestly think that Derrick Henry might be the worst running back on this team. I mean, you got Zach Moss putting up 32 points on the bench. Granted, Jonathan Taylor's coming back, but who knows what his role will be. Breece Hall putting up 27. So, I mean, Vic Vinegar has debatably 4 top 10 running backs right now. Teams just absolutely loaded at running back. I expect Vic Vinegar to make a big move at some point to move one of those running backs, bring in a top end tight end or a top end wide receiver, and probably be one of the top teams in this league. On the other side, Team DS never really stood a chance. Ramondre, huge letdown, 2 points on running back slot. Tyler Higbee, 3 points. I think Team DS has some holes, but overall it's a talented squad. You got Jalen Hurts and Tyreek at the top. David Montgomery has outperformed expectations. DeAndre Hopkins is not totally washed. So there's some talent in Team DS, but never really had a proper chance this week. Moving on to our next matchup, we had Nice Catch Blanco Nino taking down myself, Mr. Stinky, 102-91. And, let me tell you, Nice Catch Blanco Nino, it comes out worse for the wear in this matchup. Losing Justin Jefferson, going on IR, that's a minimum 4-week injury. People seem to be pretty pessimistic about JJ getting back this year. Obviously, when you have the 1-1 and that 1-1 goes down, it's going to be tough to come back. And looking at Nice Catch Blanco Nino's team, lucked out this week with a nice performance from George Kittle. 26 points there, 27 points from Josh Allen. Puka Nacua, another 17 points. So some decent performances, but there's not a lot of talent on this team. I think the commissioner's got to be sweating a little bit right now. Luckily, there's a couple teams down at the bottom that'll probably save him from having to do any shotguns or plan a golf trip, but I don't think it's a very good team. And he did knock off my squad, so that says something about me. But, the Baltimore Ravens are a real disappointment for Team Stinky. Lamar Jackson putting up 10 points. Mark Andrews putting up 10 as well, but Andrews dropped at least 2 touchdowns. I think the Ravens had 7 drops overall. Defense wasn't great. Just a disappointing performance. And then you look at it, Khalil Herbert going down with an injury. A tough blow after he put up 8 points, was looking decent. Tony Pollard barely did anything, 6.5 points. So some running back issues for sure for Stinky. Probably some wide receiver issues, just a lot of issues all around. Not a great performance, but, probably not down in the depths like some of the other teams that we have in this league. Moving on to our next matchup, we had Strickland Propane and the DiZaysters. The DiZaysters coming out on top, 150-86. Best performance of the year from the DiZaysters. And finally, we saw Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase connect. 68 points there between the two of them. Jalen Waddle, another 12. Alvin Kamara, 17. Jaleel McLaughlin, 16 points. People laughed about the Jaleel pickup. It was the overpay of the week. Ends up being a solid pickup of 16 points. It ended up being a good move for the DiZaysters. Made some shrewd waiver wire moves thus far. Alvin Kamara might be Alvin Kamara, and if that's the case, that'll be quite a steal for the DiZaysters. Sitting first right now at 4-1. Haven't had too many points against, but we'll get to that a little bit later on. Meanwhile, on the Strickland Propane side, really unlucky to be 2-3. I mean, has put up a ton of points so far. An exception this week, but just kind of an average performance. I think there's some big running back issues there. Brian Robinson, 6 points. Gus Edwards, 4. It's tough to start the ghost of Gus Edwards week in and week out. Obviously, not having Amon-Ra St. Brown was a big blow to them. But I expect Strickland Propane to be fine. Wouldn't be surprised to see Strickland Propane attempt to make a move at some point, though, to get a running back or two, whether that's dropping a ton of money on the waiver wire or, trying to trade for one. He does have Jeff Wilson coming back. We'll see how that plays out with the HN injury. But either way, I don't think that, Strickland Propane will be too upset with this, given kind of where he's at and where his team's looking at. Moving on to our next match of the week, we had Mike's Lucky Charm take a stand. And that's 2 in a row for Take a Stand, who was sitting pretty at 3-0, now sitting down there at 3-2. Mike's Lucky Charm got absolutely nothing from a few positions, and namely quarterback Jordan Love, 5 points. Devontae Adams, 7 points. But did get some good performances from Isaiah Pacheco and Tajay Spears. Sam Laporta is looking like an absolute stud, putting up 18 points. And on the other side, Take a Stand, absolutely burned by a couple things. I mean, Hunter Henry, 0 points. That 0 probably cost him the matchup. James Conner gets hurt, only dropping 4 points. Devontae Smith, 1 point. So if any of these guys in other weeks have performed well, performed at even an average level, Take a Stand probably takes the win. The one thing I will note is I do perhaps owe an apology to Take a Stand. I've been very hard on them for needing a quarterback. And to that extent, Sam Howell and Brock Purdy have gotten the job done. I don't think anyone saw that coming into the year, but those 2 quarterbacks have been workable for Take a Stand. It hasn't been too big of a hold. They've managed to come through it. So, credit where credit's due. I think Mr. Blazer is doing a nice job managing that team over there. On the other side, Mike's Lucky Charm made a bold decision to start Terry McLaurin and Zay Flowers over Calvin Ridley, still missing Saquon Barkley. The decision to start those 2 receivers didn't really pan out. Ridley had 17 points. You got to wonder if he's overthinking himself a little bit. But with Saquon Barkley coming back, Mike's Lucky Charm definitely has a good squad. Kenneth Walker on the bench, Justin Herbert, who will replace Jordan Love. So a lot of talent on that team. Definitely looking for more from them as the season progresses. Moving on to our second to last matchup here, we had Jordy's Ghost and the Auto Draft Bot Squad. Auto Draft Bot Squad getting their second win of the year over Jordy's Ghost. Justin Fields just carrying the load for Auto Draft Bot Squad. 32 points. Adam Thielen, 22. Thielen has been overperforming so far this year. Dallas Goedert's been solid. Hollywood Brown might be one of the steals of the year thus far at wide receiver. There's definitely some holes there. We'll get to those in a second. On the Jordy's Ghost side, though, just kind of an average performance. There were 2 choices, I think, that really cost him the matchup. One was Kirk Cousins over Jared Goff. That was an 8-point swing. And then the defense, Washington D getting -1 points against the Bears. He also had Dallas D on the bench getting -1 point. So either defense was going to be wrong. But quite a surprising performance, and quite surprising from the big Bears fan to pick a defense against the Bears. So he was double burned by the Fields performance. On the Auto Draft Bot Squad, what I wanted to revisit here, Miles Sanders and Aaron Jones starting at RB get a combined 1.2 points. Aaron Jones doesn't even play. And I got to wonder, was Auto Draft Bot Squad just absent-minded, or was he trying to laugh in the face of Jordy's Ghost? It seems like it's almost a bit of a brag from Auto Draft Bot Squad to start Aaron Jones there. Almost to say, I've got this matchup, there's nothing you can do. And that's some cockiness that we haven't seen from that owner. Clearly, he's feeling good with his squad despite being 2-3. And maybe the squad's a little bit better than we expect. Once he gets Eckler back and DK Metcalf off the bye, there's some decent talent on this team. Might not be quite as down in the dumps as we thought. But let me tell you, though, these last 2 teams here, absolutely down in the dumps. A bunch of garbage here. If we're looking at this Naz Sneaky Pete matchup from last week, it was just gross. I saw Roadrunner's Naz shotgun and he's got to be feeling pretty rough right now. But yeah, honestly, both teams deserve a shotgun. You can't win with 69 points. I'd be embarrassed. I wouldn't give a win. I'd take an L. Both teams should have taken an L here. I want to make sure that both owners are aware that we can't tank. There's really no benefit for finishing last unless they want to plan a golf trip, which it seems like both of these owners may want to. Sneaky Pete finally starts Romeo Dobbs after getting a lot of criticism for leaving him on the bench, and he gets him 0.9 points. So that owner clearly is just all over the place, overthinking, listening to the crowd, the media, doesn't quite know what to do. On the other side, Roadrunners Naz just has an injury week, seemingly. Anthony Richardson goes down, dropping 4 points with a big shoulder injury, head to IR. James Cook hasn't been as advertised with a mediocre 3 points. Matt Breida trying to replace Saquon gets 3 points. So Roadrunners Naz, just a lot of trash there, a lot of trash on the Sneaky Pete side. I expect these two to battle it out all year for last place. But that concludes our, whip around the league for last week. Let's take a look at the standings quickly and just highlight some points here that we're seeing. The best teams points-wise thus far, Take Stan and Mike's Lucky Charm. They're very close. Both have 590 points. They're the only teams at that level. I think that they may be two of the most talented teams, but don't count out Vic Vinegar or Strickland Propane. Both of these teams are loaded at skill positions. They're maybe one trade away from being the absolute top end of the team. I'm looking for them to be super active as we start to get into this middle part of the season. At the very top, we have the DiZaysters overachieving a bit. We'll get to that when we hear from the man himself shortly. And at the bottom, as I've mentioned, I think Sneaky Pete and Roadrunners Naz might be two historically bad teams for this league. I mean, they could maybe win less than 5 games between them, which would be pretty embarrassing. And I think they should almost share the burden of the punishment. And it's a little bit sad, I think, because otherwise, we might see the commissioner down there. He's sitting at 3-2, but having lost Justin Jefferson at this point, we might see the commissioner down in those deep depths of the garbage pretty soon. He is sitting 3-2, but I gotta think that there's just not a lot of talent left in that team with Justin Jefferson going down. I wouldn't be surprised to see him make a move. He does swindle people, and we'll see if that's the case again this year. But anyway, that's a recap of our standings. Let's move on to our next segment. It's going to be a brief one. We've put the word out looking for mailbag questions. We only have one mailbag question this week. It comes from our active listener, Mr. C. Williams, out in California. And he had to say this. He said, "It's clear from the past weeks that Taylor Swift hitching up with Travis Kelce has been a huge financial and ratings boon for the NFL. It begs the question, why hasn't our commissioner adopted a similar tactic to bolster our own league's viewership? Do you think he is letting the league down in this regard? And what famous girlfriend should he be targeting for himself?" What famous girlfriend should the commissioner be targeting for himself? I think that's a great question. If we're talking someone that could, most increase exposure, I'm going to go with Beyonce. I think he should probably try and steal him from Jay-Z. I don't think the commissioner would be intimidated by Jay-Z. And honestly, his profile, Roger fucking Goodell, you can't tell me that he's not up there with Jay-Z. So I think the commissioner should try and make that move. I think it would greatly increase the profile of the FTTC. I would expect us to get a regular TV slot if that happens. I'd expect $1 billion in revenue pretty quickly. And in fact, I would expect Beyonce to be a regular guest on this show. So I think the commissioner should go out there, make that move, do his best. And if he gets shot down or shot, well, that's the consequence of trying. So best of luck to him in those endeavors. But now we're going to move on to our last segment, and we're going to hear from the manager of the DiZaysters on their recent performance. Without further ado, let's hear from Mr. Zane. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are joined by our current league leader, looking for what could be back-to-back years of top-end finishes, the manager of the DiZaysters, Mr. Dan Zay. Dan, how are we doing?
Doing great, Jason. Happy to be back on the pod after kind of the early season or the preseason interviews. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad we got to talk to you before the season started. Obviously, things have started out pretty well for you, sitting up there at 4-1. How are you feeling about the squad at the moment?
I'm feeling pretty good, but at the same time, feeling very fortunate to be sitting at the top of the league. I don't think there's ever been such close calls. Not having to, I think my only loss of the season, I was I beat Billy for the beer chug on by 2 points, and then I beat Coco the first week, I think, with the lowest point total ever for a win. So I'm pretty stoked to get out of the shotguns and be 4-1. Feeling pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely dodging some bullets. There's no
Yeah,
doubt
still
about
is.
that. But like, I mean, when we look at your team though, like I feel like there's a lot of untapped talent that just hasn't really performed for you yet. Like that Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase stack, man. I thought that was going to be great for you going into the season, and it feels like last week was the first week that it finally clicked a little bit. But I mean, are there any players outside of those two that you think you're really looking for more from?
I think Rondell White is I think that's his first name, but
I think Rashad.
Rashad White. So I don't even know the name of
Yeah.
my team. I think he has the potential as the season goes on to do a lot better than he's been doing. I think just the Bucks, with Baker as the new quarterback, it's going to take them a few weeks to kind of get in sync. So I'm hoping that he kind of starts to be a more consistent RB1, RB2. That might be a little hopeful, but really happy with my Moody pickup in free agency. I feel like he's best offense in the league. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think I just need the commish to just keep talking shit over my pickups. I feel like every single time he talks shit, it goes well for me. So the Jamar Chase, McCaffrey comment, and all of a sudden Chase goes off for 45 points. McLaughlin, it's all working out well. So kind of shout out to Coco to keep trying to put me down.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's come at you a little bit this year. He seems to always put a little bit of a target on your back, and he's not having the best season himself. We look at some of the teams down at the bottom of the league, and he's floating there right around middle of the pack. But you got Sneaky Pete down at the bottom, you got Naz down there. You got a favorite yet for who you think's going to finish last?
I'm gonna go with Naz. Whenever someone's saying fire sale after 5 weeks, you know that it's they're kind of in dire straits. So, but Sneaky Pete's I think he just got a win last week if I'm not mistaken, but his point totals have been pretty low. So I think it's going to be a battle between Billy and Brian. But
Yeah, I think.
Naz can pay his next 4 leagues with his playoff win last year. So I think he's still sitting pretty.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I will say that we also invited Naz to make an appearance on the podcast today. He said, quote, "I'm too ashamed to show my face right now." So he clearly is down about his team. You mentioned him having a fire sale, though. Just off that, top of your head, you look at his roster. Is there anybody you might look to target?
Let me pull up his team if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not like every player on his team could be bad, so it's got to be.
No, I think he's got some talent there. It just depends who he's willing to part with. He's got Cooper Kupp, DeAndre Swift.
There we go.
The rest is pretty much garbage, but hey.
The website's kind of hard to navigate. The rest is pretty much garbage. Yeah, I mean, if I was him, I would probably try to trade Cooper Kupp and get a couple of players that fell off the team. Man, his bench is rough.
It's just pretty rough all around, I think.
Yeah. We're starting
really
Russell Wilson after a 1-4 start. Living in Denver, man, that's sad. It's sad to look around Denver and see his face posted everywhere, but just watching him play. But yeah, I mean, DeAndre Swift, I think, is going to be solid as long as he stays healthy. Chris Godwin's probably underperformed a little bit this year, but if I was him, I would definitely try to go a 2-for-1 with Kupp and fill out the rest of the team because, that is pretty poor starters and no depth.
It's definitely pretty rough looking at their roster, and I know he'll be listening to this, holding his head down in shame.
Yeah, especially when you're just hoping
obviously
someone to get injured. He's got 3 backup running backs that he's stashed, just hoping and praying that Barkley or Eckler gets injured again.
Yeah, but the problem is both of them have been out, though, and neither of the backups have done anything. I mean, as the commissioner will attest, Josh Kelly may be in the running for one of the worst waiver wire pickups of the year after the commissioner dropped $35 on him. And he put up, I think, 10 points over 3 weeks. So I don't know that those backups are really worth anything.
Yeah, even when he starts, I agree. Nothing made me happier. He said he was
Now,
taking notes, so I want to see what his notes say about Joshua Kelly's performance.
no, I mean, like you mentioned the commissioner kind of coming after your waiver wire moves a little bit earlier, and one of the ones from last week, I actually kind of foresaw someone overpaying for Jaleel McLaughlin, but it worked out for you. I mean, did you feel like you were, putting down a pretty hefty bid when you got him for I think 35 bucks?
I did. I did. I think I hadn't spent much of my budget thus far, and my bench was looking a little weak. So I feel like Williams is kind of like Eckler and Barkley, pretty injury prone, and Jaleel's been he performed really well last week. So definitely, even though he performed well, it's still definitely an overpay. But love to have a couple of options on my bench that might be able to pay off in the long term. It's not like I'm going to be dropping them anytime soon. So I guess with the budget I had, just wanted to make sure I got them. To find out that no one bid on them was a shocker, but I thought that was pretty shocking.
I mean, it was definitely probably a bit of an overpay, but it worked out in your favor. Like you said, he had a good week, and we talk about the commissioner chatting some shit, and I think he would have, even though he knocked me off last week, I think he would love to have another running back right now. Looking at the league standings, though, is there anybody who's really surprised you thus far with their performance?
Let's see. I mean, Jason, I think you were a popular pick to do worse in the league, especially with that name Stinky, and you're putting out a pretty awesome performance. Some smart signings like Jerome Ford. So I think I'm going to give you some kudos. Gabe Davis has been performing really, really well. So I know you got doesn't look like you have that deep of a team with Khalil Herbert being out, but you've put up a pretty hefty point total, more than me at least.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think my bench is pretty weak, but I think my starting lineup could go up against most teams in the league. You look at some of the standings though, and I think it's funny. Like you got like Vic Vinegar and Strickland Propane sitting down there in 7 and 8 with 550, 544 points respectively. Obviously getting killed in the points against, and you're sitting up top 422 against. So it's been a pretty fortunate run to start the season. I think things have been looking up for you. I wonder if that'll turn though. I gotta ask. Like, let's say the rest of the season goes, and you end up winning with winning the league. You go like 13-3. You got the least points against, and middle of the pack points for. Do you think that is worth the title if you pull it off?
Do I think it's worth a title? I mean, I think the points for obviously is huge. My points for is probably worse than it actually is after my 150 points last week. Really brought my total up. So I'm way luckier than even the current point total says. But I do think there's some guys that have been putting up some pretty massive point totals. I feel like while there's a lot of parity across the league, there's been some really high point totals with also some really, really low point totals as well that that I think has been skewing the numbers a bit. I'm getting pretty lucky, but I have, besides, I think the 2 weeks where I almost shotgunned have been pretty consistent and just gotten lucky with the people who I've been playing against. But I think the people that will win the league are going to be most consistent in and out on a weekly basis.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. We got two more quick ones for you, and then we'll let you go for the day. But we were talking about squads a little bit earlier, and obviously I want to circle back to that for a second. But you got an open mic for the rest of the league. We've seen a couple trades early on, but things have kind of quieted down. Is there a position that you might be looking to improve on that you want the rest of the league to understand?
Interesting. Yeah, I think I'm open to trading one of my wide receivers for another, for maybe a 2-for-1 deal. So if someone's interested in Jamar Chase or Keenan Allen, that can offer me a tight end, with another receiver paired, I'd be open to upgrading my tight end position. But overall, I think my team has underperformed a little bit this year. Obviously, I've gotten really lucky on who I played on a week-to-week basis, so I'm pretty confident in who I'm putting out there every week, and just hopefully the Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase pairing continues to perform like it did, because that would be huge.
I mean, if things turn around for you and your team really actually starts performing expectations, already being at the top, you could be in a really good circumstance as the year advances. But last one for you, and then we'll let you go. Is there a particular location or maybe set of golf courses that you would look at for the golf trip? Just to advise potentially Mr. Naz or Sneaky Pete where they should be looking?
Yeah, I think my number one vote would be Sand Valley in Wisconsin. I have not been there. I heard they have some pretty sick houses that you can rent out for relatively cheap. That would fit, 12 guys with some golfing right next door. Have you heard of Sand Valley at all?
I haven't, but I know there's a bunch of really nice courses up there, like up around, especially like where Erin Hills is and whatnot. Like there's a bunch of great public courses up there.
Yeah, and they're actually, this is probably not for this next year, but they're building, so Sand Valley is by the same property development company. I think they have one other, but they just announced they're building one in Denver. So they build like 3 courses next to each other with a lot of like townhomes you can rent out. So almost like a Green Lake, but
sweet.
Yeah, that's my recommendation.
Well, there we have it. Some good golf course recommendations for whoever ends up on the bottom. But Dan, thanks so much for joining us today. Best of luck for your team going forward. It seems like you're well positioned, at least thus far, and may it continue for you, and maybe you'll take home a title.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, appreciate you doing this on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
It's like a job with not paying anything.
Yeah, it's not as bad as it was preseason, but we're sticking with it. But thanks again for joining us, and we'll speak to you again soon. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks again for listening to another episode of the FTTC podcast. Best of luck to the league in the upcoming Week 6 matchups. We look forward to recapping them again next week. I'm your host, Jason Stankiewicz. Until next time.